Erase areas in an image to enhance appearance. How do we utilize the eraser tools found in Photoshop? So this is a way that we can erase an area without making a selection first. Photoshop has 3 eraser tools. The eraser tool, plain old normal, the background eraser tool, and the magic eraser tool. Let's start with the first, normal typical eraser tool. So the eraser tool brushes off pixels. It drags those pixels off. It's completely opposite than the function of a brush, which paints pixels on. So we can utilize the brush tool here. I'm going to increase my brush size. We can utilize the eraser tool here, and I'm going to first increase my brush size. I'm using my square brackets. You can also look up here in the top in the options bar where I have my complete brush panel. All of my brush options, same as what I would have with my brush tools, are available with my eraser tool. I also have mode here, and I can choose mode of brush, pencil, or block. Pencil gives you a straight, no anti-aliasing occurring, and block is of course a square. So I'm going to go back up to my brush here. Now the opacity is the amount that I want to erase, how much the strength of my eraser is. I also have a pressure sensitivity here if I'm using, say, a stylus, flow with an airbrush feature, and then I can erase to history. If I specifically designate a history state, I can erase back to history. Let me reset my graphic here, reverting it. So what I just did was File, and I reverted it to my last saved version, which is F12 or function F12 on a Mac. That will take me back to the last time I saved my document. Okay, so now with the eraser tool, a couple of things that I do here. So if I erase a layer that does have another layer underneath of it, I will see that layer. And let's just do this by making a new layer. Now I can't drag it below this layer because this is a background. So I'm going to double click OK, and now I can drag this layer below, and let's just do a fill of a specific color. So we'll do something that we can obviously see, like a bright blue. So I use that as my foreground color, and I Alt or Option delete, and it fills it. I also can do an edit and fill it with my foreground color or something else I'd like to specify there. Okay, so now that I have a layer underneath of my initial layer, if I take my eraser tool and just click and drag, oh, wrong layer, undo, click on the right layer, it looks as though I'm painting with my foreground color, but what I'm doing is dragging those pixels off. So if I turn this layer off, you're able to see transparency. So if there would not be a layer underneath of this one, I would see transparency. If I were to lock this layer, and if I have this layer active, I can lock the transparency pixels here. There we go, you can see the tooltip. I get a lock icon. This highlights, indicating that my transparency pixels will be locked. And now if I click and drag, I see white, which is my background color. Okay. If I have a background layer, let's do an F12 here again to revert back. This is the background layer. If I click and drag here, notice how I see now my background color. So if I erase a layer that either has the locked transparency or an active being a background layer, I'm going to see the background color, the active background color. Let's move on to the next tool, and I'm again going to reset this back, so we're starting with a clean graphic here. Let's move on to the magic eraser. So eraser is pretty easy to understand. It's basically erasing pixels. It just depends on what you've got going on in your layer panel. The magic eraser like it says, is magic. So what this does is it grabs similar colored pixels, and it works just by clicking. So the eraser tool, we could click, or we can click and drag. With this tool, works best if I just click. And it is very similar to some tools that we have, the Magic Wand tool. It works very, very similar to the Magic Wand tool. So instead of, make sure I'm on the Magic Eraser tool, so instead of selecting by pixel, it eliminates by pixel. So it saves me a step of making a selection and then deleting. I can just eliminate or delete by pixel color. So I have some options up here at the top. Tolerance, this is exactly what you would see in that Magic Wand. Tolerance, how tolerant am I going to be? How close does the pixel that I click on have to be with what I want erased? So, whatever I click on determines how much around it is going to be erased. And I have a tolerance of 32. Anti-alias, of course, that gives us the smoothed out edges. Alias would be crisp. That would be the stair step effect. So we want to keep anti-aliased on. Continuous, so this means, am I going to click colors that are continuous throughout the picture, or is it just going to be where exactly I click? Same as the Magic Wand. And then sample all layers and opacity. Remember, opacity is like my eraser strength. If I go out here, and remember, I'm just clicking. So let's click right here. Pretty cool. If I were to increase my tolerance, more colors would be selected. So if we increase this up to, say, 50, and then click down here, look how much more color pixels are being removed. So I can get pretty close if I have a decent contrast here, knowing that my little tree frog is not going to be deleted. Got to click in the right spot, but instead everything around it will be. So again, a fairly easy way, and I probably want to zoom in to see some of these little pixels and get rid of those. Okay, so it's not absolutely perfect, but you can see that I did a fairly good job of deleting pixels of a certain color without making a selection. So that's the Magic Eraser. Just think Magic Eraser, really the same as Magic Wand. Let's revert back again. Now let's look at that last one, the Background Eraser tool. So this is really similar to like a pencil eraser on paper. And again, it works by clicking. And what's going to be selected is what's underneath that crosshair. So you see I have a fairly big brush size here. Again, you can see all my options up here. My brush size is fairly large, but what it's going to do is it selects the color that's in the color right underneath those crosshairs. And it will erase that particular color anywhere within the brush tip. So where the Magic Eraser erased all of the color that was next to each other of the color that I clicked, this just looks inside of my brush. So it does work best with the large brush size like I have here. Okay, and it's going to expose the layer beneath it, or transparency if there is no layer beneath it. So you can see how that works a little bit differently. I can control. Now look here. If I click in the red between the frog legs, but not on the green of the frog, it will delete the red but not the green because it's going exactly where my crosshairs are. Okay, so you can see that my tolerance is a little bit low here. I can play with my settings because it does start to delete some areas outside. So it's looking at everything underneath the brush size, and that might include more than what I want. So a little bit more open, but the Magic Wand really does constrain. So these are the 3 Photoshop eraser tools, basically a way that you can erase an area without making a selection.